In this episode of Restore It, it's more progress on the 325i Touring. After all of the welding in the previous episode, I'm going to take a break from pain and discomfort and focus on other parts of the to-do list, like removing all of the surface rust from the paintwork and preparing it for the respray, removing the bumpers and deciding whether or not I need a new front valance, sending parts off to professionals for work, and a host of other things. One thing I need to do in preparation for welding the passenger footwell is to remove the side skirt. Doing this will also give us a good look at the sill panel itself, which is most likely rusting in places. As you can see, the real front right jacking point is quite rusty and again quite bent. And the front corner is of course completely rotten. The middle section is very good, but the rear jacking point is also completely rotten. But we'll come back to these and the rest of the major and minor rust spots, like these ones, once I've made my way to the underside of the car. I've also just noticed that this rear left door is rusting quite badly along its bottom edge, which could mean another new door is on the horizon. Before I can remove the surface rust from the paint, I need to remove any trim pieces that could be hiding it. Using the trim clip removal pliers, I'm getting all of the sill trims out of the way as I can already see surface rust creeping out from underneath one of them. With those out of the way, I can now remove any surface rust I find with a 36 grit sanding disc. Surprisingly, there wasn't that much rust to remove. However, somewhere there definitely is rust is on this front valance. I'm going to remove it along with the bumper, firstly so I can dismantle it and see if it's worth saving, but also so I can get to the oil cooler and see if I can get it to fit properly, something I failed to do in the final episode in Spain. With those out of the way, we can now see that the oil cooler brackets are in the correct orientation, and the slightly old U-clips I installed in Spain are now fully old and will need replacing, along with these headlight screws. But firstly, I'm going to dismantle the front valance, as I can already see it will need some serious work if I do decide to save it. Although it looks good from the front, it's not looking good from any other angle. I may shot blast and restore this, but I might just buy a new one. Let me know what you would do down in the comments. Coming back to the oil cooler, I'm going to disconnect it from the pipes, flip it around and see if that fixes the mounting issue. And before I put it back in, I'm going to swap out all of the old U-clips for new ones. Thankfully it was just installed upside down and turning it round has fixed the problem, and I can now secure it in place and reattach the pipes for now. I do have the centre caps for these wheels, but instead of removing this set, I'm going to send off the set I restored when I was in Spain, as I did a rubbish job and it will save me having to remove these ones, which I'll use for the Sport once I continue work on it. I'm sending these wheels to Rolling Rims in Essex, the company I made an episode on whilst they did the wheels from the 1M. They're going to be stripped and powder coated, which will leave them looking factory fresh. As well as removing rust from the panels, I need to remove all of the trim that's going to get in the way of a proper respray, like badges, lights, exterior door trim, and the gasket for the aerial. With a good amount of stuff removed, I'm going on a quick side quest to clean up the engine bay and front end. After sitting for 4 years, all of that work I did on the engine bay in Spain is hidden under several layers of dust. Well, I wish I'd done that sooner. Both are now looking so much better and clean enough to go into a spray booth. Everything looks good apart from a few bolts and screw heads that need to be replaced or zinc plated, like these bolts and this oil pipe bracket. With that done, I'm going to remove any trim clips that are still attached and get the door handles out of the way. There's a thin strip of perished rubber that runs along the top of the sill panels. I'm not sure what it's for, but it needs to come off. Now that it's gone, I can remove some more surface rust and give the area a good clean. And the same can now go for the other side. This door, much like the driver's door, is rusting along the bottom edge. I'm grinding this down to have a quick look to see if it's worth saving, but by the looks of it, I'm not sure it is. Thankfully, I already have a spare one to replace it with. I just need to double check the condition of that one to make sure it's a lot better than this one. Up next, I'm going to remove the mud flaps, as they're going to be right in the way of paint, and also, everything attached to them is super rusty and covered in dirt. The 4 clamps holding them both in are caked in mud and rust and are completely seized. It took quite a lot of time to get them all off. Now this is where the real fun starts. The rear bumper has to come off for the respray, but one of the bolts that runs through the bumper shock is so stuck that it's breaking my tools. Well, this really isn't good. I'm getting worried I'm going to break myself in a minute. I think it's time to cut the head off, as it's starting to round and it's only going to get worse. Now I can remove the black trim and take the bumper off. Oh wait, no I can't. The other end of the seized bolt is still attached to the top of the bumper shock. This is also going to need chopping off. With the bumper out of the way, I can now see what was causing all of that fun. After having a good look around, I have noticed some damage on the rear right corner that will need looking at before I can even think about the new paint. But one thing I can do is remove the bumper brackets, the air vent things, and the bumper shocks. With the rear valance now clear, I'm moving up to the boot lid to remove anything that will get in the way. Apart from the rear spoiler, that's about it for the rear end. Moving to the side of the car, the piece of trim that runs along the top of the doors and down the A-pillar needs to come off. This is done by prying it off at the front, popping off the body coloured part at the back, removing the little clip that joins the two, and then sliding the main piece towards the front of the car. This sounds easy enough, but as they've been in the same place for 33 years, they won't really want to move. I'm using some WD-40 to help it along its way, but the trick is to gently tap it from the rear and slowly push it off of the front. The edge I'm tapping is flaring ever so slightly, but because it's made of aluminium, I'll be able to flatten this back down quite easily. It also sits under this joining piece, so it won't be seen. With it off most of the way, I can now pull it from the front, being careful not to bend it. And there we go. It took ages, but that's the first one off. There is some surface rust underneath, so that will also be ground down before the end of the paint prep. The same can now go for the other side, but I'll skip the 20 minutes of tapping that it took to get it off. Now I need to keep these safe as they're quite fragile. So with both of those off, I'm now going to degrease, clay bar and dry the panels to prepare them for sanding. After speaking with Rob, the guy who's going to be painting the car, he recommended I use a sanding pad from Safe Product Limited called the SP600 to prep the old lacquer. These are abrasive foam pads that cut like a P320 but leave a P600 finish, whilst gliding over most edges, contours and curves. These can be used to prep new panels, sand old or new paint, and they even key metal and plastic panels before primer. They can be used wet, but work best dry, which is what I'll be doing. As I was purchasing a box of SP600s, I mentioned restore it to the guy on the phone, and Safe Products Limited offered to send me some samples of their other products, which I'll be making good use of on the touring. So without further ado, let's sand down the lacquer. There are more things that need to be removed, but as I have most of the panels clear, I'm going to get most of the sanding done now with the DA and come back in with the SP2000 hand blocks once everything else has been removed. The bonnet took 5 minutes and 10 seconds to flatten with the DA. I'm not an expert, but I think that's pretty quick. Now I can use the SP2000s to do the edges and along the ridges in the middle. I'm not even sure if I need to do these parts by hand, but I'm going to do it just to make sure. I've spent exactly 3 minutes using the SP2000 block, so the bonnet took me around 8 minutes in total. Now I can move around to the rear right door as the driver's door is still missing. This door took me 9 minutes 45 with both the DA and the hand block. So around 10 minutes per panel, maybe a little bit longer for the roof. Moving on to the boot lid, I'm so glad to be sanding down my terrible paint job from Spain. Not having a proper spray booth made me hold back on the clear coat, and the finish is just terrible. As I was sanding the section behind the license plate, I noticed some rust coming through. These patches are going to be cut out and replaced with new metal this time round. Thankfully it's a nice easy job and will give me the chance to try tighter gaps and higher voltage. I'm going to leave the rear valance as it is for now because it needs a lot of derusting and a bit of straightening before I can prep it for paint. I must say I don't know what I would have done had I not spoken to Rob the painter and then Safe Products Limited. I probably would have made quite the mess of it. Still, I've said to Rob, if you end up redoing my prep work, just add it to the bill because I know too well that it's all in the prep. I'm also leaving the seals for now as they're going to undergo some serious changes in the coming episodes. In the next episode, I'm going to remove things like the door locks, the upper door trims, the window wiper and motor cover, the front windscreen, and anything else that I might have forgotten during this episode. So the only large area left to do with the DA is the roof, as well as the A-pillars, so I'll do those with the hand block first. This has to be the most satisfying job I've done on the Touring so far. The SP600s made very light work of it, and now all that's left to do is the door seals and any bits that are still under trim that is yet to come off, like inside the fuel filler cap, under these trims and around the front windscreen. Also in the next episode, I'm going to cut out and replace this bad metal on the boot lid, clean up and straighten the rear valance, before prepping the rest of the body for paint. And after that, I'll go back to the land of rust and pain and get the welding on the top side finished. So that's all for this episode. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.